My teacher humiliated me in front of the whole school. Years later, I returned to the same classroom. But this time, I was holding the power. I still remember the sound of laughter. Not the joyful kind, the cruel, sharp kind that cuts into your soul and stays there forever. It was the school assembly. The whole auditorium was full, students from every class, teachers lined up in front, the principal watching from her chair. It was supposed to be the day I gave my speech, my first chance to speak in front of the school. I had worked on it for weeks. I practiced every night in front of the mirror, whispering words under my breath while my mother slept in the next room. I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the richest. But I was trying. I wanted that one moment to feel like I mattered. But Mr. Ajay Verma made sure I never forgot how small I was. He was my English teacher, the one everyone feared. He had a voice like thunder and a tongue sharper than glass. And for some reason, he hated me. He used to mock the way I spoke, correct me in front of others, even when I was right. And that day, when I stepped onto the stage with trembling hands and my handwritten speech in my pocket, he smiled in a way that chilled me. I got through the first paragraph. My voice was shaking, but I was doing it. Then it happened. He stood up, walked toward the stage, and interrupted me. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, loud enough for the mic to catch it. "Let's all appreciate mediocrity on full display. This, right here, is why I say not everyone is meant to speak." There was silence. Then the first laugh. Then more. Some kids chuckled. Some tried not to. A few looked at me with pity. But I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen, staring at my teacher, the man who was supposed to guide me, as he tore me down in front of hundreds. I ran. Ran off the stage, past the curtains, through the hallway and into the empty bathroom where I collapsed on the floor. I stayed there until school ended. No one came looking. I didn't go back to school the next day. Or the day after. I stopped talking in class. Stopped trying. My grades fell. My confidence died. And Mr. Verma? He never once apologized. Instead, he used me as a joke in other classes. "Don't be like her," he'd say. She thought she could speak English. My world became smaller. Quiet. Filled with shame. At home, my mother didn't understand. She thought I was being moody, lazy. She didn't know how deeply I had been broken. But I never forgot. Every time I looked in the mirror and hated the person I saw, I remembered that moment on the stage. That moment he killed something in me. But what no one knew, not even me back then, was that something else had also been born that day. A quiet fire. A promise. That one day, I would return to that school. To that classroom. To that stage. But this time, I wouldn't be the one trembling. This time, I would be the one holding the power. Time moved on for everyone else. But not for me. To them, it was just another embarrassing moment in a long string of school memories. A joke, maybe. A whisper. A cruel laugh passed in the corridor. And then, forgotten. But for me, that day never ended. It replayed in my head every night, the sting of his words, the way my voice cracked, the cruel rhythm of the laughter, like 1,000 knives against a bruised soul. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mr. Verma's face, that cold smirk, that deliberate humiliation. While the rest of the class went on with their lives, exams, crushes, vacations, I stayed stuck. Trapped in that one day. I stopped raising my hand in class. I'd skip school whenever I could. When I had to go, I'd sit in the back, silent, almost invisible. I no longer dared to write. I feared even reading aloud. English, once my favorite subject, became a language I buried inside me. No one asked why. Not the teachers. Not my classmates. Not even my mother. Because people don't ask about the quiet ones. They just label you shy, average, not ambitious. But in my silence, I was building something. Not anger, not at first. But hunger. Hunger to become someone Mr. Verma could never predict. Someone he would never be able to silence again. In the final year of school, I barely passed. There was no farewell party for me, no signature on my shirt. I didn't matter in anyone's memory, except my own. I carried the weight of that humiliation into college. And in the beginning, I was still scared, scared of speaking, scared of failing, scared of becoming that girl again. But then something shifted. One late evening in the college library, I came across an old, worn-out copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Inside the front cover was a handwritten quote. You never really understand a person until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. I didn't know why, but it broke something inside me. Or maybe it rebuilt me. I spent the entire night reading it. And something lit up again, my old love for words, for language, for meaning. And that night, I decided I would master the very thing he said I was unworthy of. English, speech, language, power. While others chased relationships or parties, I stayed in. I devoured literature, studied grammar, watched interviews of powerful speakers, practiced in front of mirrors again, but this time, not with fear, but with focus. And slowly, quietly, I transformed. My accent sharpened. My voice grew steady. My words gained weight. And with each passing semester, I climbed. I won debate contests. I became a columnist for the college paper. I gave TEDx talks. Professors began to recognize me not as quiet, but as sharp, precise, fierce. And every time I held a mic in my hand, I remembered the first time I held it, trembling, ashamed, broken. And I would whisper to myself, this is for her. For the girl they laughed at. For the girl he tried to destroy. I was in the middle of a conference call when the email came. Subject: Invitation to speak Annual Motivation Week, Green Valley High School. At first, I thought it was spam. But when I read the sender's name, my hand froze on the mouse. Green Valley. My old school. The place where I had once been laughed out of the auditorium. And now, they were inviting me back as a guest speaker. Not a student. Not a joke. But someone they saw worthy of the stage. The irony wasn't lost on me. The email was polite, even enthusiastic. We have been following your rise in public speaking and education advocacy, it read. We would be honored to have you inspire our students. They had no idea who I really was. They didn't remember the girl who had run off that same stage years ago. But one man would remember. Mr. Ajay Verma. I stared at my reflection in the darkened screen. Older now, sharper. My eyes carried storms, not tears. I clicked accept. The day I returned was bright and painfully familiar. Same gates. Same yellow walls. Same scent of chalk and dust in the air. Somehow, the school had barely changed. But I had. I wore a black blazer, crisp and professional. No trembling hands, no shaking voice. Just confidence wrapped in silence. Students passed me with curiosity. Some teachers greeted me, not recognizing me at all, until I saw him. He stood near the staff room, sipping tea, a little grayer, a little slower. Mr. Verma. He turned, and our eyes met. At first, confusion. Then recognition. And then, fear. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. But I wasn't a ghost. I was the reckoning. He approached slowly. Aisha, he asked, as if unsure. I nodded once. Good to see you again, sir. I didn't know they invited you, he said, already uncomfortable. I'm sure you didn't, I replied, a small smile playing at my lips. There was a long pause. I listened, about that day years ago. We'll talk after, I said coolly. I have a stage to prepare for. And just like that, I walked past him. I could feel his eyes follow me. But this time, it wasn't because he saw me as weak. It was because he knew he couldn't stop me anymore. The auditorium hadn't changed. Same dusty red curtains. Same squeaky floorboards. Same wooden podium. And the same buzzing sound from the old ceiling fan above the stage. But this time, I wasn't walking up as a student trembling with fear. I was walking up as a woman who had fought her way through every ounce of shame, every drop of silence, and turned it into purpose. The student volunteers welcomed me with nervous excitement. "Ma'am, would you like water?" one asked. "You'll be introduced right after the principal's welcome." I smiled. "I'm ready." Backstage, I stood where I'd once hidden crying. The memory was still there, like a scar you forget until you trace it. I could hear the crowd outside, chattering students, clicking pens, shifting chairs. Then the microphone crackled. And now, the coordinator announced, "Please welcome someone whose voice has touched thousands, whose courage and clarity in speech has inspired change, Ms. Aisha Khan." The applause began. Soft, scattered. No one knew who I was. Not yet. I stepped onto the stage. For a second, everything stopped. Because I saw it. The exact spot where I had stood years ago. The place where Mr. Verma had humiliated me. And somewhere in the second row, there he was. Older. Stiffer. Watching me. Not with contempt. But with quiet dread. I took a deep breath. Then I began. When I was in this school, I once stood on this very stage. I was a student, nervous, unsure, but hopeful. I had written a speech, believing that words could change things. Believing I could belong here. But I was laughed at. Mocked. Not by classmates, but by someone meant to guide me. A hush fell over the crowd. That moment changed me. It silenced me for years. But here's the thing about silence. It listens. It learns. And then, one day, it speaks louder than any insult ever could. Now the silence in the auditorium was complete. Not even the fans dared to creak. I continued. "I'm not here to name names. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to tell every student sitting in this room that if someone has ever made you feel small, remember, they don't get to define you. You do." And then, something I didn't expect happened. Applause. Not polite, but rising. Students stood. Teachers stood. Even some staff clapped with emotion in their eyes. I stood still. And across the room, I saw Mr. Verma, no longer a towering figure, no longer in control. Just a man watching the student he tried to crush rise higher than he ever imagined. The applause was still echoing as I stepped down from the stage. Students rushed toward me, some asking questions, others simply wanting to shake my hand. A few had tears in their eyes. "Ma'am, that was so powerful." One girl whispered. "You spoke what so many of us feel every day." I smiled, genuinely moved. Because I saw myself in them, in the shy boy standing in the back with folded arms, in the girl gripping her notebook too tightly, afraid to raise her hand. And yet, even in all that warmth, I could feel one presence pushing through the crowd. Him, Mr. Verma. He was trying to make his way to me. His pace was hurried, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in him before, panic. But I didn't wait. I turned toward the exit where the event coordinator stood. "Can I use the back door?" "I'd prefer to leave quietly." She nodded, clearly understanding the request. "Of course, ma'am." "This way." I followed her down the narrow hallway behind the stage, the same hallway I had once run through with tears in my eyes. Only this time, my steps were calm, slow, composed. As I reached the exit, I heard a voice behind me. "Aisha." I paused. He was standing there, just a few feet away. Mr. Verma. Breathless. Red-faced. Desperate. I need to talk to you," he said, trying to catch his breath. I stayed quiet. He took a step closer. "I never meant to. I didn't know it would stay with you that long. You have to understand, it was a joke. I was under pressure. The school board was watching, and..." "Stop." Just one word. Firm. Unmoving. He froze. "You had your time to speak," I said quietly. "I gave you my silence for years. Today, I spoke. That's enough." His lips parted, searching for words. But I had already turned around. I stepped out into the sunlight. Into the open. The same school that once boxed me into fear now stood behind me like a closing chapter. And him? I didn't need his apology. Because I had already written my own ending, without him in it. 2 days after the event, I received a call from the school principal. Her voice was unusually soft, cautious, as though she were speaking to someone far more powerful than she had expected me to become. "Ms. Aisha," she began, "we were truly honored by your presence at our event. The students are still talking about your speech. You've become quite the inspiration." I waited, letting her words hang. Then came the real purpose of her call. "We'd like to formally offer you a position here, as a guest mentor. Perhaps even a permanent faculty advisor if you're open to it. We believe someone like you could transform the school from within." I should have felt flattered. Once, the very idea of being wanted by this school would have thrilled me. But now, I had outgrown them. I didn't come back to decorate the same broken system. I came to dismantle it and build something new in its place. "Thank you," I replied. "But I have a different path." Silence on the other end. "I'm starting a program," I continued, "for students who've been silenced, mocked, told they're not enough. A public speaking and confidence boot camp for the overlooked and underestimated. And it won't just be for this school. It'll be open to every school that ever failed to protect the soft-spoken." The principal stuttered, surprised. "That's incredibly noble." "It's necessary," I corrected. Because Mr. Verma wasn't just one man. He was a symbol of every adult who believed cruelty was power. Every system that rewarded humiliation. Every classroom where fear replaced learning. And I wasn't going to fix just one teacher. I was going to change the equation entirely. Within months, my program launched. Project Revoice. It started with 20 students. Then 200. Then schools from other cities began calling. Former students volunteered. Donors contributed. Media outlets ran stories. I was no longer a forgotten name from a torn school register. I was the voice that rose above the silence and invited others to do the same. The workshop had just ended. 35 students, some as young as 10, others in their late teens, had stood tall in front of the mic and shared their voices with clarity, courage, and pride. The applause was raw. The smiles were real. I stood at the back, letting them have their moment. That's what Project Revoice was about, creating space, not taking it. And then I saw him. It had been over a year since our last encounter. He looked older now, slower. There was no storm in his posture, no authority in his walk. "Mr. Verma." He didn't come up to me right away. He waited until the room began to empty. He stood at a distance, as if unsure if he even deserved to be in the same space. But eventually, he approached. "I wasn't sure you'd let me in," he said softly. I raised an eyebrow. "Everyone is allowed here. Even those who once silenced others." He lowered his eyes. "I saw the articles. The videos. The stories from your students. I had to see it for myself. The work you're doing." He trailed off, then looked at me with something real in his voice. "It's incredible." I nodded. "Thank you." There was a long silence. Then he said it. "I spent the last year thinking about who I was. The kind of teacher I became. And I realized I was more interested in control than in education. I mocked what I feared: softness, uncertainty, vulnerability. And I used the classroom as a stage for my own ego. I didn't interrupt. Because I didn't need to." He continued. "I heard you. Not just once, but repeatedly. And I've carried that shame with me." There were no tears. No begging. Just quiet honesty. He added, "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I know I may not deserve it. But I want to learn. If you'll let me, I want to start over." I looked at him, this man who once crushed my voice, now standing humbly in the room I built from its broken pieces. And I said, "Then take a seat." He looked surprised. "Take a seat," I repeated. "Not as a teacher. Not as an expert. Just as a learner. Sit at the back. Watch. Listen. Understand." He nodded slowly. "I will." And he did. For the next several sessions, Mr. Verma returned. He never tried to take the mic, never imposed. He sat in silence, watching young students reclaim the very thing he had once taken, their voice. And maybe that, in the end, was redemption. Not loud, not dramatic, but slow, steady, and real. The sun was setting behind the city skyline as I stood backstage at an international education summit in Singapore. The hall was packed, educators, policymakers, youth leaders from across the world. Cameras pointed at the stage. My name glowed on the digital screen behind the podium. Keynote speaker, Aisha Khan, founder of Project Revoice. Just before stepping out, I took a moment to close my eyes. And in that silence, I saw her, the 16-year-old version of me, standing in a school bathroom, hiding from laughter, clutching her torn speech in her hands, wondering if she'd ever feel safe enough to speak again. I opened my eyes. She wasn't just a memory now. She was the reason I stood here today. When I took the stage, I didn't speak for recognition. I spoke for every child who had ever been humiliated by someone in power. Every quiet soul who was labeled average, unworthy, less than. Every student who once believed that one moment of shame would define their whole life. I shared my story, not as a victim, but as someone who rewrote the ending. The world will always have people like Mr. Verma, I told the crowd. People who mistake cruelty for discipline. Who believe fear is the same as respect. But it's not. And we, the unheard, the forgotten, the overlooked, we are not here to fight them with the same weapons. We are here to build a better classroom. When the speech ended, the applause was deafening. People stood. People cried. And somewhere in the very last row, I spot a familiar face. Mr. Verma. He had flown in. Not as a speaker. Not as a VIP. Just a man sitting quietly, watching the student he once silenced speak to the world. After the event, I walked past journalists, past VIPs, straight to the exit. He stood there waiting, but I didn't stop this time. I just looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "You once taught me silence, but I turned it into a school that teaches voices." And I walked on, because I no longer needed his guilt, or his permission, or his apology. I had moved beyond it. From a girl mocked on a school stage, to a woman changing classrooms around the world. I didn't just get my revenge. I got my voice back, and I made sure thousands more never lose theirs again.